A huge welcome to BlockSap and today's science talk. I hear myself. Can we maybe turn it down a bit? Perfect, thank you. So I'll start again. So very welcome to BlockSap and today's science talk. We are here live from Copenhagen from the Innovation Hub and co-working space, and we have participants both in the room with us and online. For the ones of you who don't know me, and the ones that might be here the first time at the science talk, I am Jule Rumpe, and I'm the science coordinator in BlockSap, and I'm also hosting this year's series of the science talks. And with these science talks, we are we are actually actively giving science a voice and a platform. So we're inviting researchers here to BlockSap to present their research and their knowledge at those science talks. But before we're going to hear more about maybe one of the most discussed or famous projects here in Copenhagen this year, I would like to, just as usual, thank our partners for this year's series, which is the International Union of Architects and the World Congress of Architects, which was hosted this year in July in Copenhagen. And this Congress in July united architects from all over the world during 1 week of inspiring events. And the science talks that we are hosting this year are sort of framing the Congress. And therefore, we have also taken over the Congress theme, which is Leave No One Behind. This is the universal value to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have taken over that Congress theme, but we've also edited a little bit because we say we want to leave no one and nothing behind. So, but same as the UIA, we as BlockSap have identified architecture and urban design as a key driver to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So finally, let's shift our attention to today's science talk by Lone, Nicole, and Seda. So we have Lone with us here today in the room. And Lone, she's an architect by education and conviction, just like she's saying herself. And now she's the Director of Sustainable Buildings at Velux. At Velux, she is combining business development with innovations in the built environment. Nicole, who is with us online, is a Ph.D. from Politecnico di Milano, and she's currently working on her research on Phygital and Cognitive Paradigm for active house in-use rating. And last but not least, we have Seda. She's also joining online. You'll see her shortly. Is a postdoc from UC Leuven in Belgium, and she's working on her project about SHAPE, which is a abbreviation for smartness, health assessment, and performance evaluation. And both are being co-supervised by Lone in their projects. So together, the three will today present 5 key principles which can be applied to any home, community, or city to create homes that are scalable and affordable. And at the same time, they will also present how the project Living Places demonstrates that it's possible to build with a 3 times lower carbon footprint emission and also 3 times better indoor climate than any average single family house in Denmark. So enough from me now. I know you're all curious for the science talk. Just a last reminder that we will, as usual, have a Q&A session afterwards. So for the ones of you that are online, feel free to post questions in the chat already. We will come back to them later. And for ones of you in the room, you can already think about questions or just enjoy the talk. The stage is yours, Lone.
Welcome to you in the room. Thank you for coming. Welcome to you watching online. I'm happy that we can do this as a split presentation, also because some people couldn't be here, so we will have it also to go into depth. And above all, we in the Velux group are here to be in dialogue with you in the building industry, because we are very convinced that we have to make a fast progress on the green agenda and transition, in particular in the building industry, which stands for more than 1/3 of the emissions. And none of us can do that on their own. Nobody is big enough to do the difference we need to make on our own. So we believe strongly in partnership and in dialogue. And I can see that there are many valued cooperation partners here in the room, and I know some of you also watching online and later on. So we look forward to the dialogue. But to leave no one behind, I would like to do an introduction, starting with the background for why we have developed a housing concept with the lowest CO2 footprint in Denmark. We have divided it up into a short background on It's Our Nature. Then I will talk about living places, as Julia introduced. Nicole will talk about active house, results from the houses, and Seda about shape. And then we do a Q&A, and you can write the questions online as we go. And like I said, we're looking forward to the dialogue and the exchange. And the reason for us being three is that I may have studied a postgraduate master's, I may be an architect, but I still don't have a real scientific degree. So I think it would be a bit fake to call it a science talk with me only. The real scientists are Seda and Nicole, who are doing, as Julia said, a Ph.D. and respectively postdoc on these aspects of sustainable buildings, which is incredibly important. So very briefly on Velux Group and our sustainability strategy, which is from 2020, called It's Our Nature. And it actually founds back to 1965, when our founder, who you see here on the picture, Willum Kan Rasmussen, he formulated this purpose from the Velux Group, which actually covers both the social, the environmental, and the economical aspects. Back to 1965. Had we written it today, I don't think we would have changed it. Maybe we would have written in sustainable into the wording. But this is our guiding purpose as a group in the building industry. Also, of course, as you know better than any, our world needs it. We have to take action in this decade. This is the decade of action. So the way we have approached it is on 3 levels. Securing a responsible business with 9 targets, innovating products, obviously that's what we deliver, produce and sell, that is expected from us, and then the pioneer targets. And that's what's important today. The 3 pioneer targets are, one is the historical footprint of the company, then it is the footprint of the products, halving over 10 years. And then what I'm going to talk about today is showing how to build sustainably, because it's not just about the company, it's not just about the products, but it is, so to say, the scope 3. What do we do with the buildings where our products fit in? We don't sell any roof window. Nothing leaves our factory that is not being built into a building, being part of a system. And that's the system that we all cooperate around. So it is, if you want, an ecosystemic thinking. And we do this because innovation is part of our DNA. This is also our founder, doing stuff with a windmill on Manø back in, I think it was the early 70s. So that was shortly after the picture you saw with him on the pipe. And he said, one experiment is better than 1,000 expert views. And that's how we are. That's also our guiding principle. We can talk long and broad, and we can do a lot of PowerPoints, but we also have to show something. Just briefly on the historical footprint, because that's worth a science talk on its own, but we will leave that to my colleagues working with that and WWF. But it's about the scope of the footprint of the company throughout 100 years, from when we were founded and then up to when we are 100 years in 2041. And we neutralized the CO2 of the footprint over 100 years. We are the 3rd company, we think, in the world to be working with that. And there's a lot of interesting talk we could have around that. I would just like to emphasize that in our perspective, it's not only about what we do from now on onwards, it's also about what we have done in the past. We cannot ignore who we have been in the past. And this is our focus here. Then there is the carbon footprint, the products that we produce, and that is by far the biggest part of the CO2 and the scope 3. Talking about scope 3, this is scope 1 and 2, these 6%. So 94% is not in a Velux factory or something that we can decide over, because it's about steel and glass, aluminium, and that is some heavy stuff that we then have to work in partnership with our suppliers on. And this is by far the biggest task. I think we can say that for sure. It's giving us some bit headaches, but we are on a good path. We can't say that we're there yet, but we're on a good path for 2030. The buildings show how to build sustainably. We have been actually working with demonstration buildings for 20 years, more than 20 years. Doing renovation and new builds and more than 30 projects in over 22 countries. So what I'm presenting today stands on the shoulders of what we have done in the past, and that is what the company has done. Many good colleagues, architects, engineers, other colleagues who have worked to push the agenda for sustainable buildings. And why is that important? Well, I think you all know that the CO2 emissions in this sector is more than 1/3. Energy consumption and CO2. So what is it we do? Well, we see that we might be, first of all, taking on the lead. That is one thing, to do that. The second is you can play a role as a catalyst for impact and for change, and that is the role we're trying to take. We can't do it alone, but we can get the idea and we can get it started. And that's what we decided 4 years ago, when we decided to look at this framework, because it's important to say that it's not just about the buildings. We cannot only talk about the buildings. We cannot only talk about the four walls. We have to talk about the urban development and what is it we leave behind, or what is it we shouldn't leave behind. So to do that, we have to look at it in a framework perspective. I won't go into depth with this, just to mention that we have worked with this in a framework perspective, in what we call a compass, which would then be able to score, so to say. I think it's a very known perspective. It would be able to score the different parameters. Because if we can't manage it, we can't operate it. And here we have worked with all kinds of typologies and aspects throughout health, energy. Yes. And that is what we call the compass model that can be applied for new build, renovation, and transformation. And that actually is a continuation of our work also since 2011 with the Active House, which is our approach. We can discuss certification systems and all of these good initiatives, but we just have a fundamental conviction and belief that you have to evaluate buildings by their, of course, environmental footprint, their energy consumption, but above all, the impact it has on humans. I can see Søren from Climate in the room, not surprisingly nodding. This is what matters to us as people, because if buildings are not built for people, then what does it matter? And when I explain it to lay people, it's very simple. It's your eyes, it's your skin, it's your lung, it's your ears. Does that matter in the buildings that we are in? Yes, it does. And we can quantify it. That's what we have done with this radar. And Nicole will come back to how we have quantified that. So this is the initiative. We call it Build for Life, and it is the whole life perspective, life cycle analysis that we have to look at. We are doing a lighthouse project in Østbirk in Jutland, which is a transformation of old barns, wooden barns, becoming an innovation house, and they are already doing the construction. Worth a presentation on its own. Today I'll talk to you about living places, how we have concretized this concept for homes. And this basically supports the purpose we have today. I showed you the one with our founder, the pipe. But today it's what we see ourselves in. We create well-being for people and planet, transforming spaces, using daylight and fresh air. That is what we are able to provide. And that brings me to talking about living places, which also takes a starting point with the sloped roof, which has, we think, advantages both from the external outside and also from inside. And we think it would be nice to bring some sloped roof back into housing. Maybe it doesn't all have to look like the same shape, the same square shape as the tendency today. We developed this together with the Effect Architects and Mo, now Artelia engineers, in a very, very close partnership, important to underline. And that is basically what is our nature, and this is one of the first visuals before we built it, trying to take the outside in, trying to make a more open envelope. and to be more in contact with the outdoors. Yes. And then we did one thing more. We have benchmarked it towards what is a Danish typical single-family house. Because with the work with demonstration buildings in the company, me and my colleagues, we have often experienced coming to our other colleagues who are not building professionals and saying, we have made this fantastic home, and look at the performance, and hear about the U-value and transmission factors, and they're like, huh? What does that mean? I can't relate to it. We have to make it more, tactile. So we took the standard Danish single-family house that Artelia has data on, and then we kept saying, what do we do that is different? And this is just you can go through it, what is the data on the one and the other, but actually I'd like to come to the principles that also Julia was mentioning, because that is the carrying base in the concept, namely that we take all of these principles into consideration when we try to build more healthy for people and planet, to share more, to not have all the same functions in one house, to make it more simple, because we keep complexifying buildings the last years, make it adaptive to fit different life patterns, and then above all to scale it. And this is a very key principle, because you can always build something nice once, maybe twice. But we actually would like to scale and influence the entire housing building industry. And that's also why we build new build, because we know that transformation is the biggest challenge, but new build is what shapes the legislation, and also the trends, and also the first movers and the pioneers. And those are the ones that we would like to work with and reach. I will only go into the healthy part, and this is where we have managed to go from, this is actually the legislation, the benchmark house is 11.1, and this is from before we had the decimals. We have it now verified to be 3.8. So that is 3 times better, and the indoor climate is 3 times better. And why is that so bad in a one single family house? Well, the climate guys also in the room have a lot of data on that. The basic thing is that the secondary rooms, which are actually the primary rooms, the kids' room and the bedroom, are not regarded when it comes to indoor climate. It's always the nice big rooms with the facade and the panorama windows. And those are the rooms, the secondary rooms are the ones where we spend the most time. So that is the most decisive for how good we feel the next day, ability to learn, perform, and so on. Yes, these slides are mainly for information, but this is the benchmark house of the put on the life cycle, the full life cycle approach, which is now corresponding to the Danish legislation from 1st of January 2023. This is our verification, which is important. It's not just something we say or our engineers say. It is actually verified by a third party. And this is how we try to explain life cycle analysis to, our visitors and our target groups, because life cycle analysis is something very complicated. I'm fully aware, and there's a lot of decimals, and there has to be. But on the other hand, the weather forecast is also very complicated, and there's a lot of algorithms and so on that I don't understand. But I can still read a weather forecast. And the same with life cycle analysis. You can go and look at the different shelves where you pick the stuff with which you build your houses, your homes. If you're going to renovate your house in the weekend, there will be shelves in the DIY where you can pick actually these elements to build from. And what will decide the CO2 footprint? Well, it is what you take off the shelf. This is what they took off the shelf when building the benchmark house. This is what they chose and said, we like to build with these types of materials. And this is what we use to build the timber frame home. So the difference is from 11.1 to 3.8. It's simply a matter of taking it down from the shelf, looking at it just like you do when you buy food, and then assessing quality and price and so on. And this is the CLT. We have made 2 structures to not discuss the structure, because that's not material to be discussing exactly which structure. And for the nerds, or even the semi-nerds as myself, these are the faces. And they are incomplete, obviously, but we have actually done all the calculations for if they were complete and more above that. These are the main savings. What is different? Same again. And these are the preconditions for those who would really like to know what's inside. Yes, the people part, the senses, is just as important, because of course we could build a nice home which had no windows. We would never do that for good reasons. But we also think that nobody should actually be deprived from access to daylight and fresh air. So this is the approach, and we are here because of the UIA 2023, and we are partners for that, and we chose Copenhagen as the launch platform because of the Copenhagen capital. So this is why we have built it as a living lab, in order to showcase it, because once you can build it, you can discuss it better and learn from it. That is the purpose of it. And we chose Jernbanebyen, the old freight train area in Copenhagen, which has some very interesting student housing, some quite nice old buildings, and is fairly central in Copenhagen. It's placed out here next to the tracks and between some main roads, but still 3 kilometers from the main station. We've built it up as a village because we cannot no longer only talk about the 4 walls. It's so important you also remember Corona. I mean, oops, you all of a sudden realize very much where are you living, what is immediately outside, who are your neighbors, do you even know them, do you know their name, could you go and help them, or vice versa. So this notion of community was very important. That's why we built it up as a village, and we built 2 single-family homes. One is the CLT, and the other is the timber frame. And then we have exhibitions and events. And this is from the visualization to the finished result. We opened in April. Now the greens are growing. I've actually just been there, and we have a vegetable garden also. That's also a very important part of where you live, which is self-sufficient by 80 square meters, done by Fælleshaven. And we have a lot of interactions with, the different functions in the pavilions, and then with a lot of, professionals like yourself coming there, having a look and discussing. We have welcomed more than 5,000 people since we opened over 2 months, and still more coming, and we have actually decided to let it stay until September 24, because lots of people would still like to come and see it. And coming back to the compass, before I hand over to Nicole, this is how we score it, but it's also about the one planet, and what is it that we are not leaving behind. So we took a motive from the planet, finding stones. Margrethe Odgaard has done this, finding stones and pigments from the planet that has guided us to the colors of the interior system. And these are the stones giving this color scheme, and that is what you will see. If you have not yet seen, please stop by and look at the houses, because this is what matters most, is if you feel connected, it's difficult to express what it is, but it's that feeling of being home, identity, belonging, feeling safe and secure. It's not about necessarily a 213 square meter home. It's not about the bricks. That's not what you're looking forward to when you're coming home. So just a brief look inside. We have made a virtual tour, and actually next week we will be releasing a film, which is a documentary that is also showing you the homes in greater detail. But still, I encourage you to stop by and come and have a look. I think the next open house is 18th of September, but we have a website, and there's a link where you can come in and have a look. Here I'm showing the CLT, so the solid wood house, so to say, and then compared to the timber frame house, where you come up on the first floor, and you have the 2 rooms, identical. They have a bit of different orientations, and a bit of different also fenestration. And then you go upstairs, up the nice wooden staircase, and you come up to what I like to say is the best room, is the bedroom, which is the top floor. So it's a 147 square meter home, but we have also developed it as a row house, where the CO2 footprint can be as low as 2.9. So we're getting close to the 2.5, which is the one planet where we leave nothing behind or don't use too much. Yeah. And this is our partners, proud partners, without whom we could never have done it, and we're doing it in great cooperation. So, yes, happy to pass over to Nicole to explain a bit more about the Active House parameters, to go more in depth with that, because she is the mastermind behind that. Over to you, Nicole.
Okay. Hi to everyone. Thank you, Rune, for presenting me. As has been said before, I'm a third-year PhD candidate at Politecnico di Milano, working on a thesis supervised by Professor Marco Imperadori and co-supervised by Lone Feifer, which is titled Fsense, Phygital and Cognitive Paradigm for Active Housing Use Rating, estimating via IoT devices the effect on comfort during the building operation in a multi-purpose and beam-based framework. So the paradigm consists of 5 points toward achieving the sustainable management of cognitive buildings to fill the gap between predicted and actual performances by determining and validating them with the multi-criteria evaluation method of the Active Housing House Rating Scheme, to enhance the compression of performances and communication between stakeholders, and to recalibrate strategies for increasing comfort during building operation, promoting sustainable practices and use of buildings, and digitalizing the built environment toward AU objectives. So before describing the monitoring of living places, the path includes the Active House Protocol 3.0 description that has been already shown a few minutes ago in the slide by Ilone, and the CPH Village pilot project, which supported the validation of the monitoring strategies applied to the living place building. So the Active House rating scheme is recognized internationally as a sustainable building certification, and is based on the three main principles of comfort, energy, and environment. And it focuses on 9 criteria: 4 for comforts, 3 for energy, and 2 for the environment. It's important to say that to certify an Active House, the building should achieve an average score in all 9 criteria equal to 2.5 or less for new construction, and in contrast for renovation or existing buildings should score at least average 3.5. What we can say about Active House is that with its holistic approach allows for a multi-criteria evaluation to create healthier and more comfortable buildings for occupants without negatively impact the climate. So the CPH Village case study is a valuable case used to monitor and measure comfort performances of 6 selected spaces occupied by villagers to visualize and validate comfort performances with the Active House in use radar, and to educate and interact with users. In order to perform the monitoring, the Arbor and the mini-node by Leakcraft and the feedback cube by Climate were installed with the purpose on one side of measuring temperature, relative humidity, and CO2 performances in the occupied spaces and monitoring them with the web app, and in the other side to educate with good alerts emitted by the Arbor of my mobile notification given to the users when comfort thresholds were not met, thus allowing users to provide feedback on their perceived comfort by rotating this cube that has different faces describing some perceived indoor environment, some condition where the user can feel. Then Following the CPH Village findings, we saw that the dashboard is a helpful tool for comprehensively understand performance variation and identify occupant habits and building design strategies, as these units were not also having the same orientation. So different perception of the environment was recorded by the interview made to the occupants. Then the Active House in-use radar of the web app provide a user-friendly interface for simplified data and display the benefit of integrating technologies to improve indoor environmental quality. Then the mobile app and the iBoards alert serve as helpful reminders for users to take action on the building by, for example, opening a window or changing the setup of the radiators. Then is also leading to increase the awareness of the environment. And finally, the feedback cube revealed that the sensor alert did not always match with occupant needs, and perceived performances were higher than measured. So, for instance, occupants perceive the thermal environment differently based on individual factors such as gender, health, cultural background, and activity levels. According to the pilot project, we finally arrived to the monitoring of living places, to which the same approach has been applied, and the devices has been installed in each floor of the two buildings, the CLT and the timber frame one, to monitor performance through the web app and the mobile one. What we can see after the forced monitoring period started in April, the actual cohort performances for the CLT building achieved an overall score of 1.3, while for the timber frame one with natural ventilation, we achieved an overall score of 1.4. It's important to say that through the dashboard, we could see dynamic and I would say live performances for the comfort parameters, so the 4 comfort parameters of Active House. The first learning, looking at these two radars, relates to the actual indoor air quality performance, for example, which are the best level according to the Active House Protocol 3.0 compared to simulated data, where lower values that actually in the Active House are expressed in an optimum score suggests that the indoor space was empty, while higher ones actually reflect that maybe the building is visited. Then, according to thermal environments, it appears to achieve better building performance with the hybrid ventilation, confirming the predicted performances, while the higher score obtained in the natural ventilated building, the timber frame one, demonstrate that there is a free contribution to heat gains. This is also because maybe the building is closed when is not visited, so there is this free contribution contributing to increase the temperature inside. Finally, as the buildings are not occupied, it's important to highlight that no feedback were recorded this time, and performance measures were not compared to those monitored. But still, till now, we have really good performance according to comfort parameters, and is interesting to see what will be measured along this year of monitoring to see actually the overall performances and compare it finally with the simulated performances achieved with the Active House. So thank you for me. This was the last slides, and I will leave the stage for to Seda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you for that, and we're passing on to Seda to talk about shape. Welcome, Seda. Good to have you with us from Brussels. And you, Nicole, was in Milan, you are in Brussels, and will tell us about your findings from shape and what is even shape. Over to you, Seda.
Thank you, Lorne. I'm Seda Kaçel. I'm a Marie Skłodowska Curie postdoctoral fellow at University Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. The project is SHAPE. It's Smartness, Health Assessment and Performance Evaluation. The project is funded by the European Union and supervised by Professor Sergio Altamonte at UC Louvain. Velux is our industrial partner. I'm supervised by Lorna Pfeiffer at Velux and Sabine Polke at Velux Belgium. So at SHAPE, we are trying to develop a new post-occupancy evaluation tool to assess inhabitant experience in buildings, so that we can be sure to provide human factors and inhabitant experience such as comfort, satisfaction, health and well-being, as well as providing buildings energy efficiency and smartness. And we have three objectives. So first, we have built a framework of key performance indicators, SHAPE frameworks of KPIs. And then through this framework, we have developed a SHAPE protocol, and in the protocol we have the metrics and methods which we can use to evaluate buildings. So to understand how the buildings are performing and how they are affecting the inhabitant experience that are who are inhabiting these buildings. And then by a tool that can be used for the future building evaluations, this will be applicable and integrated into building standards and industry. So when we say in inhabitant experience, I tried to distinguish during my first slide, comfort, satisfaction, health and well-being. It is through a new conceptual model that we have developed in collaboration with Dusan Vicina from EPFL, Switzerland, and Paulina Martinez from Chile. So the next model. In this model, we wanted to distinguish these four human factors, so inhabitant experience measures. Because when we say comfort, it's very dynamic. It's a transient feeling of relief and enjoyment. But when we say satisfaction, it's a more high-level cognitive judgment that we are doing as subjective appraisal and evaluation at a more complex level. And when we say health, it is absence of diseases, but a bit more than that. It's a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And it's like comfort, it's again transient. So healthy or unhealthy right here, right now. So it's very dynamic. And when we say well-being, it's like satisfaction. It has a higher level than health because it comprises resilience, restoration, your connection with society, contribution to communities you are living in. So it has a higher level dimension. And the relationship between inhabitant and building is important, and in this relationship, it's important to distinguish the building and the inhabitant that's who is inhabiting this building. Because when we say building, it's shelter that we are occupying. So it has indoor environmental quality and outdoor environmental quality. So as environmental conditions. And then we have the inhabitant who is inhabiting this building. And through this inhabitation, there are the feelings and states of comfort, satisfaction, health, and well-being, so as inhabitant experience. And when inhabitant and building intersect, it's inhabitancy. So how the inhabitants are using the building systems, so for example, smart systems or control systems, or how they are assessing the monitoring systems. So then in inhabitants, it's very important to ensure the usability of these smart systems, these monitoring and control systems, so that they can be easy to understand, easy to use for the building users. Why this relationship is important? Because built environment is affecting our health, well-being, and quality of life. So when we look at the environmental quality, so both indoors and outdoors, for example, it's 4 elements: temperature, noise, air quality, and light. From evidence, from scientific studies, through evidence, we know that environmental quality is associated with diseases, with some health outcomes. So, for example, temperature is associated to some cardiovascular diseases, or air quality is associated to some respiratory diseases, or sleep quality, or cognitive function. So, I think the Science Talks Day is a very nice day to organize. It's a coincidence. Today is the International Day of Clean Air. So when we talk about, for example, air quality, it's very important to, or any other environmental qualities as well. It's very important to be knowledgeable about the thresholds that standards and guidelines are guiding us towards. So, for example, in terms of air quality, WHO, World Health Organization, has the air quality guidelines 2021, which are providing us the upper limits, the thresholds not to exceed, so that when we are designing buildings or when we are maintaining and operating buildings, we need to be aware of these design thresholds, and we need to be ensure these thresholds so that we can provide a healthy indoor and outdoor environment for its users. And these relationships has been turned into some frameworks, such as the healthy buildings frameworks that we are seeing now, or there's the well building standard. So it's identifying the key performance indicators like we are doing in SHAPE, and then providing some guidelines, some thresholds to guide the designers, architects, engineers, building managers, facility managers, and also building users, so that not to exceed the thresholds and to ensure that these buildings are providing the health conditions of users. And post-occupancy evaluation is related to these frameworks because it's a well-established system of evaluating buildings through some criteria, some parameters, like we have seen in the previous framework. And so it's mainly about visiting the building, doing some audits, some surveys, some interviews, observations, some measurements, continuous monitorings or spot measurements, and then trying to see and understand how this building is performing and affecting their users. And if there are some problems, ongoing current problems, then to do some improvements and some fine tunings so that we would be enhancing the inhabitant experience living in these buildings. And in SHAPE, we have done some POE studies. So we have done the first pilot study in the student village that Lone mentioned, CPH village, next door to the living places. And in this project, I closely collaborated with Nicole. So we did the monitoring. Nicole has started the monitoring because before I was involved, and then I did some questionnaire interview and walkthrough study with the occupants. And then in collaboration again with Velux, we did the POE study of the Rena Active House. So it's a refurbished house with Effective House label in Brussels, Belgium. And also, again, continuing the collaboration with Velux, and as we have worked on a student accommodation, when I came back to Louvain-la-Neuve, to my university, in collaboration with UCLouvain, we have done the same study in the student accommodations of the University of UCLouvain. And so besides these collaborations or research collaborations with Velux, we have also organized a workshop, an expert workshop. So Nicole and myself as researchers, and Lucie Saran and Ambra Goglietti from Velux, we organized this workshop at the Healthy Buildings Europe conference this year in Aachen. And in this workshop, we tried to give the participants, provide the participants both some theoretical background and also some practical examples, like the compass tool and living places that Lone has shared with us. And we also provided a design exercise as an interactive workshop. So we provided some challenges like aging population, energy crisis, climate change, and then we wanted the participants to discuss and provide some solutions to overcome this challenge, because this is what we all need to do. So academia and industry collaborating together, discussing for possible solutions if we want to overcome and solve our current challenge. So this collaboration was very important for us. Thank you.
So thank you very much also to Seda and Nicole, and I think you can see it's obvious why I leave the floor to these brilliant scientific minds. They are so much more structured than me, which somebody in the room will even sign to. Yes, and with Seda, with your project, actually, there is the aspect of the EU platform where you will be feeding into the work with the smart indicator assessment. Right now, the European Buildings Directive next level is in a trilogue, and there is a big discussion going on around whether it will be possible to get the indoor climate parameters in there, because we can quantify indoor climate. And to renovate Europe, which we have to do, we should understand the buildings and how they are functioning today. And that is the starting point of any transformation. And we have the tools, but they're not yet in the legislation. So we are working hard for that. So we don't need the Dyson air conditioners like we have two here in Bloxhop right now. Anyway, we are out for the Q&A. And over to you, Julia.
Yes. I would say before we start the Q&A, a huge applause for all three of us because we haven't uploaded you yet.
Oh,
so
okay. Thanks.
And then we have about 10 minutes-ish. But before we start with the Q&A, I would like to give you like half a minute just to reflect on what you've heard. We've heard a lot of things. We saw a lot of slides. I think in total there were like 99 slides. So feel free for you guys in the room also to talk to your neighbors and come up with maybe some questions that you want to ask. And for you guys online, this is now the time where you can also write questions in the chat that we can then address. So I'll say like 30, 45 seconds and then we're back. And for you guys, you have a break now and can drink some water. I see there's a lot of networking in the room going on. And I hope you also online had some chance to maybe come up with a comment or question. But yeah, I can see there's a question in the room. So Elena, I think you have a microphone, yes. If you could. And then we start in the room and then we go to the questions online. Yeah, just here in front.
One question from me. In terms of reducing the environmental footprint of a house, how are you taking risk mitigation efforts in terms of climate hazards and the resilience that they will require in the future, heating, freezing, flooding? Is that something you're taking into account?
Yes, thank you very much for a good question. We are looking into that. In Denmark, we have the legislation with the full life cycle assessment of buildings being quantified based on the phases which are in use now, and there are more to be joined later. But this is it's a new currency for buildings, so it's all still new for a lot of people. We're still discussing exactly where to put what on which shelves and so on. So I think in the Danish building industry, we agree it's good. We have the legislation, and now we have 2 years of getting to know it and so on. And with our project and the 19 others that have been benchmarked as best practice, we have the lowest in the concept, but the others are also pretty low. The discussion about whether it's possible to go under 12 is over. I mean, that's it. We can start talking about 6 and then going down from there. And that's a huge leap, which I think is due to the Danish industry and the way they work together, very short distances and very close corporations. So we have an advantage there compared to other and bigger countries. But it's also clear that the LCA calculation methods have some, not flaws, but huge gaps. For instance, what about the energy systems of tomorrow? What about our products in 2030? They will have half the CO2 impact, but we cannot take that in. We have to assume that we in 25 years put in a product with exactly the same CO2 footprint. And the same with the hazardous elements and the mitigation. That would require a much more, intelligent or dynamic way of calculating, for instance, the discounted LCA method, which is rounded in France, which is really, really interesting. But as it is happening right now, every country is looking into how they can do it. And that's the playground happening in all countries. In my opinion, I think Denmark, France, and Finland are the ones having some really interesting perspectives. And on the same note, if I may, there was a question online about take-back system, because that. Yes, the circular systems. I think the question was if we in Velux have a take-back system for our windows, and we are working with that, but again, locally, regionally, because the legislation is very different as to where you are. And right now on an LCA benchmarking, it's still being discussed what will existing materials that you come from a take-back system, how will they count and where? In the beginning, or can you take them out in the end? And sometimes now they're being counted 3 times. So even if I try to say that LCA is easy, it's still a matter of getting this new currency laid out, and it's still early days, I have to say. Yeah.
Great. Are there more questions here in the room, or comments? Yes, there's one here in the back. More online.
It's really cool that you have extended the houses in the Jernbanebyen for another year. But have you also considered that maybe you could test it with somebody living there for some time, because to measure it?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that is the key. And the living places in Copenhagen was always meant as the prototype. And they are, in fact, exhibition pavilions built for the architectural year. And then they will be designed for disassembly. And they will be then next year and moved elsewhere, because they are completely functioning new buildings. But we are not allowed to let anybody live there for the municipality. You can only live in temporary housing if you are a student. maybe ask the municipality why this is, but not if you have a family home. But in our sustainability strategy, we will be building the living places as a full-scale community project. I cannot reveal where yet, but the planning is in full progress and has been for a year. We're working with a professional developer where we will exemplify the concept, and there will be real people living there. And Seda and Nicole, you will be living there measuring somebody will be living there measuring how it is performing, because that is the real deal. Yes.
Perfect. Now I think we have some questions in the chat, but if there's quick questions, we can also get the one in the room. But maybe take the one in the chat first. And then
So the first one you answered, and you actually asked what was also asked in the chat, so I only have one left.
Perfect.
And that's Sergio asking, do you think that a better, healthier and more sustainable built environment can engage, enthuse and motivate people to have a healthier lifestyle and behave in a more environmentally friendly way?
I think we can just take a vote here in the room. Anybody who believes that? Yeah. Thank you, Sergio, for a very good question. Absolutely, understanding our buildings is so key. In my opinion, we are not critical enough as consumers when it comes to buildings. We are critical consumers when it comes to what we eat and how we dress, even or other sort of lifestyle aspects. But the buildings we live in, we are not so critical. We need to become much more critical, because they are such an essential part of why we would be able to have a healthier day, a healthier life, free of allergies and sleep better. So that is definitely something that is closely linked. We have just sort of forgotten it a bit, maybe in the modernist age. But we all know that it's the end of linear thinking, and we have to think in a different way. So I think that was a long answer to which could be a short yes.
But I actually think we have 3 minutes left, and because I know that Lona has to head out, I think I have to conclude here. But for the ones in the room, you're welcome to stay and maybe mingle.
We did promise that one, didn't we?
I can ask you later.
Okay.
If you have the time, we can answer one. But
let's take one
okay,
more.
then
I just have a boat to catch,
Yes,
but that's fine.
that's why I. Perfect.
Go ahead.
Then we take the last one and then.
I know it's a good question.
Yeah, you have your best practice. It's just, what's the plan to make it common practice to build like this? When can I call my contractor and have a house like this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, great question to end. Thanks for that. Because if we want to impact housing as a whole and want to influence how mainstream housing is happening, and mainstream housing is not done once, it's something that people go and look at and buy on an everyday basis. And your home is the most important thing to your comfort and your well-being and say mental health. And that is delivered by developers, house builders, to some extent, little extent architects, but there's always a contractor or a house builder involved. And they are the ones that we want to be in dialogue with. We have actually welcomed, I think maybe 1,500 house builders to Living Places Copenhagen. And there is, I just read an article today about how people perceive change. First there is denial, then there is skepticism, then there is sadness that things will no longer be as they were. And then there is the start of the embracing, and then there is enthusiasm. And I think that marks pretty well the reactions we have had from, how can you be so low? Where are you cheating? And then we show them, and then we show them the data. We give them actually the LCA file so that they are able to copy it. And then they come back and say, we may not be building exactly the same thing, but we are going to take inspiration and we understand the thinking. And with Living Places, we are building it with a developer, and we will be also expanding into other countries, because that is the actual pioneer target.
And I think that's a beautiful note to conclude.
Yeah.
But before I will all send you out in the outside world again, I just want to thank you guys again. And also, before we give a last final applause, I would like to mention that we in Bloxab are constantly hosting interesting talks and events, and we have just recently opened a call for a submission regarding what is the most sustainable building, and I think it's quite related to what we've heard today. So you're welcome to, if you have a project, to submit what you think is the most sustainable building, and then we will announce the 5 winning projects at an event on the 26th of October. And you can find more information both on our website and on our LinkedIn post. But yes, otherwise, the next Science Talk is on 21st of September, where we will have 3 researchers talking from the Royal Academy and from KU Food, talking about building with living cells and alliances between food and architecture. So thank you for today, Lone, Nicole, and Seda, and have a great day, everyone.